Good morning, everyone. It's Lindsey Baker with the Action Hour. I'm here every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. And today I have Skylar Thomas, who is a filmmaker, conservationist, and he made an amazing film. We're going to talk about it today. It's called The Shame of Point Reyes, and Skylar is going to tell you about that in just a moment. But Skylar, let's just for a second talk about your work. Your nonprofit is White Shark Video. Tell us how you started with that and then how you evolved into your current, I would say, life mission.
Yeah, the sharks, a lot of people get fascinated by sharks, and I started diving with them and filming them, and it's something that's really easy to get addicted to because it's so amazing. And I was actually working on another shark film, but I go out to Point Reyes sometimes to enjoy nature and disconnect. And I finally kind of woke up to what was happening out there, and it was disturbing on the surface, but when I started digging into it deeper, it just got worse and worse. And I was like, okay, I've got to, it's a little bit disconnected to be talking about saving things out in the ocean when we can't even save what's right next to us on dry land.
I want to jump in and let people who don't know what's going on at Point Reyes see a little video clip about the fact that the Tule Elk there do not have an adequate water supply. Now, this is a video from the Park Services. This is about a video, a statement, I should say, from Park Services saying that there's adequate water. Let's watch this video.
On September 23rd, two members of the Point Reyes National Seashore Park Service staff went on live local radio, denouncing the concerns raised by citizens regarding the situation facing the fenced Tule Elk within the park. They stated that these activists were spreading misinformation and that the elk had plenty of water. The Park Service then published a map indicating that there were many adequate water sources within the Tule Elk Reserve. Fueled by the statements of the Park Service, two of these concerned citizens headed into the park the very next day to investigate these adequate water sources. Here's what they found.
Okay, we're going to go to the next one actually too here because I want to show a little bit more of the story. Let's get into the second one on that. And then I'll have you talk about it.
Central Pond 2, a promising looking large blue dot on the map of water sources.
I came across a group of elk hanging out in this area because there was a tiny bit of water left a while back. And I was worried about them then because there was just so little water and the landscape is incredibly dry this time of year. We're in the midst of another drought here. So instead of coming down that day to look at the pond and the water source, I left the elk because you don't want to disturb them on days like that when it's so hot. This was during a heat wave. Weeks later, the park reopened again, and I was able to get out here. Upon just coming over that little hill there, I came across two dead elk, totally mired in mud, encased in it. I imagine they were trying to get what little bit of water was left, what little bit of foul water is left.
I guess I'm having a little trouble streaming that at the moment, but I think, Skylar, I'll let you jump in here and give I know this is a recap because we did go into this on another episode. In fact, we've done a few episodes on the Reyes elk, but the situation has not changed. Is that correct? And we want people to know about it. So please, can you just kind of fill in the gaps here?
Yeah, it's actually kind of topical because this last week, the Seashore sent out an email to their email blast trying to denounce an article that came out recently that pretty much blasted the Park Service and the management of Point Reyes. And one of by the way, it's really weird for a Park Service to do this to send out to their entire, for any federal agency to send out to their email list a defense of something that an article wrote. If the article was wrong, the article would have been required to retract their statements. So instead, they went to trying to push their perspective onto their email list. And part of it was them continuing to deny that the elk in the previous died because of water. And they say really weird things like that it was drought related and the lack of water may have affected them, but they didn't die of thirst.
So they're basically saying that we should let nature, that nature is adequate. The natural habitat and the ecological system is adequate to, some may die, but in the end, it's the best thing, is basically their statement they're still holding to. I'm paraphrasing badly, but is that basically the gist of it? And by the way, I want to invite the Point Reyes Park Services on at any time to tell their side of the story. We'd love to have them on Jane UnChained.
Well, you touched on something. Their ultimate justification for not helping is that they say that the elk management plan says that they're supposed to be hands off.
Yes.
So, but that brings up some interesting things. Why are they spending so much time telling the public, well, it's not about a lack of water, or we're looking into bringing in water, or it's a malnutrition issue, et cetera, if in the end, they're not going to help them anyway. I mean, they're sending the public out chasing their tails, trying to figure out how to help the elk, when in the end, according to the Park Service, they're not going to help the elk, period.
And let's just go back a little bit, that the public has tried to intervene previously and actually even bring water into the park. And that water was taken away, we have to assume, by Park Services. So that already happened, where the public has tried to intervene, yet you're saying the park continues to say that there's nothing that needs to be done and still continues to refuse to do anything. Is that correct?
Correct. They stand by stating that the elk have access to plenty of water.
So just to give people an idea of what this whole situation looks like, in case they're thinking, well, these people are experts, they probably know what they're talking about. Let's just look at a couple more video clips of what the situation looked like when you guys went out to film it.
Pains me when I think about local politicians and other people that say that, oh, you know, we got a bunch of out-of-town animal lovers out here just making problems. Well, I'm a local, I live in West Marin, and so do many of the other people that are part of this grassroots coalition of groups that care desperately about this park and the direction it's going. So I get pretty upset when I see a congressman, for instance, say that, oh, these aren't locals. Well, I'm local. I've been photographing out here a long time. I absolutely love this place. So I get really disappointed when our environmental leaders, like our congressman who travels all the way to Spain to attend a conference where they talk about animal agriculture being a problem and a need to dramatically scale back animal agriculture around the globe. And our congressman goes there, shakes hands with Greta Thunberg and all these other environmentalists, and then comes home and says, well, our national seashore needs more cattle. And the Tule Elk, well, yeah, we'll try to find a place for them somewhere else. And in the meantime,
wow. That is really an incredible statement right there of what is going on. It's such a contrast. So disappointing. Now, we want to invite Hoffman's on at any time, Senator Hoffman on at any time to tell his side of the story. I'm sure Jane Velez Mitchell or I, of course, would be willing to speak to him and hear his side of the story. But that's so disappointing. What can people do? I'm sure our viewers right now are just furious and in despair. And what can they do? What can they do? Will it taking action, writing letters, will that help? What can they do?
Yeah, they can sign petitions. They can write to the California Coastal Commission. They can write to the regional director. They can write to the new Secretary of the Interior, who ultimately has power over how the park, or at least can direct how the park is managed, because everything you're going to hear from Huffman or the Park Service right now will basically be an excuse. You know, they can't really deny what's happening out there. They can't deny the damage happening to the land. This is proven with science. This is proven with the environmental impact statement. What it always comes down to is saying, well, you know, this is the way it has to be because we want to continue with ranching in the seashore. It's this really, I don't know. I think it's a sad devotion to something, using the excuse of culture and the fact that ranching took place there for a long time. But no one wants to talk about the coastal Miwok people who were eradicated from the land. You know, they want to talk about the rich cultural history of Point Reyes, but only if they're talking about the ranchers who came in and converted that area from native plant life into non-native plants that exist only for their industry, while the rest of Marin County reflects that same thing. There's no shortage of ranches, and no one's going to forget what dairy and cattle look like. We have the ugly reality of it surrounding us almost everywhere, actually.
Right.
So, you know,
right.
allowing the elk to die, there's only one reason for it, and that's the existence of the ranches.
And then yet the area they're taking up is such a small area, and the ranching area is so large. Let's look at some more footage to showcase this a little bit more. Do you want to, maybe before we go into more videos, there is a ranch up for sale, correct? And we have some images of that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that situation, how it's being marketed, and so forth, without mentioning any names and so forth? Can you tell a little bit about what's going on there? And I'll show some of your images. So why don't I show a couple of images, and then you can speak about them.
Okay.
So of course, this image shows up on the website. Is that correct? For where they're trying to sell the farm? Go ahead, I'll let you walk through this.
So these are images that are on the advertisement, on the real estate advertisement page. And because it's selling a working dairy, these are images that are the reality of dairy and the reality of the land. And if you look at a company selling dairy using images that are supposedly of the same area, it looks extremely different. It's, you know, false advertising. That's, you know, that's the reality of what dairy does to the land. And what we're sold in marketing is happy cows going through lush green fields full of wildflowers.
Right.
When the reality is the land looks like that last image that you showed almost the entire year.
It's desolate. It's empty. There's nothing there. There is some green here, which you in your videos you say are trees. By the way, if people want more information on this, please get informed for yourself. Go and see what this is about. This is not, God forbid I say this, I love the Reyes elk, I love animals, but it's not just about the animals. It's about the entire ecosystem at a seashore national park, where this is our land, and there are cattle ranches on there that obviously, from my opinion of the pictures I see, are devastating it. And nothing is being done. It appears from what the stories say, nothing is being done. Now, this is an actual picture of what it looks like, correct?
This is the ranch that's for sale outside of the seashore. The ranches in the seashore aren't owned by the ranchers. They're being leased to the ranchers by the government because we already bought those ranches. If people
Wow.
if people don't know that already, these ranchers receive millions of dollars for that land. And part of the Park Service's process of acquiring land when they want to create national parks is to buy the land and then give leases for a certain period of time for the people to transition away. This has happened at multiple parks throughout the United States. I was just learning about the Channel Islands recently where that happened. But in this case, when the leases expired, instead of leaving, the ranchers had managed to do enough lobbying over the course of that time to get legislation changed to where they got special use permits and got to keep staying. And so right now, these people got paid big money by the Park Service so that we could save that land, and are now benefiting further because they're receiving an incredibly discounted rate to lease that land, while simultaneously owning multiple properties in the rest of Marin County. And there's something that they all share in common: the land looks like crap anywhere that cattle and dairy operations are taking place.
Literally.
Yeah.
Not
Covered in crap and looking like crap.
Oh my God, it is so horrific. Let's look at some more. You have a talk a little bit while I'm lining this up, presentation that you put together. Here I'm going to be showing about how destructive cattle ranching versus nature is the topic.
This presentation is for the webinar called Wildlife versus Cattle. And really, that means nature versus cattle, because you can't wage war on a member of a habitat without the rest of the habitat being affected. This is not a monoculture. This is nature, where the members of the habitat all need each other and work together. The Tule Elk are front and center in this because they are an iconic species. They are endemic to California. So we could also call this elk versus cattle. But it's much more than elk versus cattle, because if this is how the Park Service is going to manage a species in the spotlight, it should sound an alarm for other species. Now, many of us, myself included, remember a morning, a special day in Point Reyes, shrouded in fog. And unfortunately, that special morning was followed by looking at this, looking at this, and maybe the worst for me was looking at this. And that's when I dropped everything that I was doing to work on this project, because it just was too much for me to believe that everything good I had experienced was being destroyed for something that I found to be rather horrific.
Okay. Wow. That poor baby calf, and that just seeing him, and that changed your whole direction to really pursue this. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. If we go back a little bit earlier in my life, I came from cattle country. Like that was the main industry where I grew up. So, you're talking about someone who was raised on that culture and, couldn't imagine a life without eating beef, who finally came to a realization that my shark conservation work was kind of hypocritical and full of crap when I was editing conservation films with one hand and eating the problem with my other hand, because everything's connected. You can't pretend that the land and the ocean don't have anything to do with each other. In fact, we empty the oceans in large part in order to feed livestock. We're not solving hunger problems. We're contributing to an industry. And then the runoff from the cattle industry goes into the ocean and creates these massive dead zones. So it's all related. And you can talk about, well, my food is sustainable, or my fish was sustainable, or my cows came from happy cows. And it's all BS. These are all lies that we tell ourselves in order to continue doing something that we want to do, instead of just facing the hard truth that we should stop doing it. And that's where Point Reyes came in. And that's where me, ceasing to purchase products that contribute to the death of the planet came in. And that kind of made me wake up to things, the number of lies that we tell ourselves, or that we participate in without even being aware of it. Because if you aren't challenging yourself, if you aren't saying, I should stop doing this, then you're not questioning what you're doing. And if you're not questioning what you're doing or where your food comes from, it's a lot easier to drive past land that has been devastated by an industry, or drive past baby cows without even thinking about the fact that these are animals that are days old and living in isolation instead of being with their mothers.
And sometimes in freezing conditions. Let's look at another one of your clips, because you go into more about the what was planted in the natural habitat. Let's just look at that a little bit more. It's fascinating. This one, I think, is...
The exploitation of the livestock is something that bothers me, but the treatment of the land is a tragedy in itself. And, as I already hinted on, you can't mistreat the land without mistreating all the animals that depended on that land, or at least that land in the form that it was before the exploitation began. I'm just going to let the footage play for a little bit as you wrap your head around the fact that this is a national seashore, a unique location cherished as an epicenter for biodiversity, reduced to this. Almost every challenge facing water quality, facing the soil, facing the plants, facing the wildlife, would be solved by simply ending ranching. But all of those problems are justified by culture and tradition. Economics is thrown in there too, but that's a lie for another video. Let's focus on plant ecology for a minute. This is Point Reyes, September 13th, 2020. This is also Point Reyes, the very same day, except this is in the Elk Reserve, free of ranching activity. And there isn't any incredible geographic change. There isn't a mountain separating the two areas. There's just a fence. And right now I'm panning from the Elk Reserve to ranchland. And I'm going to point something out here. As drastic as that change is, that's land not actively being ranched. That's land that's recovering from ranching. This is me standing inside the Elk Reserve, looking back out at land that is actively being ranched. Maybe you're thinking, that's not fair. You got to show it during the winter when it's rainy. Okay, well, there you go. This is ranchland, January of 2020. So yeah, there's some green, even where there shouldn't be green.
Wow. So
the ecology aspect of it's really interesting. I've actually gone back to school. I've gone from sharks to plants, and it's all because of Point Reyes. When you start to realize how much everything interacts and works together, you can't just overlook plants, because that's where it begins. That's where they're the producers. That's where the food begins. That's where the shelter. That's where the nesting. That's where the hiding. And ranching is all about destroying that. It's equivalent to getting rid of biodiversity. And it's happening in a national seashore. And the Park Service staff, maybe it's part of their job duty to do this, defend it. And they go through great lengths to try to make excuses for why it should be allowed to continue, despite the fact that in the end, it equals damage to that park and the wildlife there. And it's funny.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I've been researching this stuff for a long time. So I dug into the original congressional testimony where ranchers went to testify against the seashore. It's often said that the ranchers were an important part of establishing the seashore. The truth is that they fought it the whole way.
When you say they fought it, explain what you mean by that. They didn't want the National Reserve there? Is that what?
Yeah, they were against the proposed national park plan.
Okay.
And in the testimony, one of the ranchers is telling the committee about how hard they've worked over the years to get Point Reyes to look the way that it does. And proposing this is that Point Reyes looks better. And the committee's buying into it because they're thinking of the green hills that during a couple of months of the year look good in California. What no one's realizing is that the rest of the year it looks like crap because of that same industry. Whereas we could have perennial green, year-round green. These people have taken great lengths to destroy native vegetation,
Right.
which in turn gets rid of native animals.
Yeah, that's the point I wanted you to make, that they are bringing in alien vegetation, for that lack of the proper word. And what is happening is what you just said. It's destroying not only the landscape, but a lot of the animals are going into, it's becoming risk for them, or more than risk, they're dying. So let's watch another clip, because I think seeing the visual as well is, we've got more on this. So let's keep going.
And this is the Elk Reserve, also January of 2020. Ranchland, later in the spring. And the Elk Reserve, later in the spring. Point being, that was as good and as green as the ranch land gets. But during September, during the harsher months, even the Elk Reserve, where native plants are allowed to live, you can still find green. These are plants that are drought resistant because they evolved in the climate of California with animals that evolved with those plants. And while it's true that the hills do turn green in the winter in the ranchland, that is not habitat. That is essentially a golf course void of biodiversity.
So what's happening? Is it appears that the cattle ranches are turning the National Reserve into a golf course.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of biodiversity of the soil and the plants and the vegetation that are needed by the animals in order for the wildlife to survive and to flourish, this is the one little plot that we've given them. Is that correct? And so I don't know if this is speculation, but do you have any idea? I guess what you said before, it appears that the ranchers would like to just have that be ranching and not have a reserve, or they're just saying they want to fence it in a little more. What are they saying? What are their goals, and why are they putting the fence up? Talk a little bit more about the fence. And what's really weird to me is no one's tried to take down the fence. Activists, I know that's illegal, but it just seems like people would cut a hole in it or something because these animals are dying. Has anything like that happened, or it's just so weird? Can you get into that a little bit?
Well, you have to remember that if the elk leave the reserve, then they're on ranch land, and who knows what will happen to them.
They'll shoot them probably. Well, we don't know what would happen, but wow. So I didn't even think of that. So yeah, it's more dangerous than for them to.
And some of those
toss up.
In that Adequate Water series, there's a clip where the guy that I was out there with talks about how he spotted some elk that actually managed to escape. I guess they crawled underneath a section of the fence somewhere. And once they get out, because their instincts. They're animals. They're supposed to roam. The Tule Elk of California had a huge range that they would travel, and now they're basically being forced to live like zoo animals. Or maybe that elk was leaving the reserve because he was trying to find better food, some water. In any case, once he got out, he realized, well, wow, this is a real wasteland that I've walked into, because he has photographs of these bull elks, and they're standing on a mowed down field of dirt that was just sprayed and covered with a blanket of manure. And this is what the Tule elk that escape get to encounter.
Oh.
I mean, it's pretty bad all the way around.
You're laughing because you don't want to cry.
It is. It's so frustrating that you just like, it seems like this is a fiction. It seems like this shouldn't be happening.
It doesn't seem real. No.
Like it shouldn't be happening on private land, much less a national seashore that the public own. The public own it. And it's treated like the ranchers own it. And every time that the public make their voices known, their voices are ignored. Ignored. Overwhelmingly, the public does not want what's happening in the seashore to be taking place. And it just
see that right here in the comment, right here. This woman is saying, I'm so frustrated with the national park for defending ranching. I write letters, post on their Facebook page, and they always have an excuse and always defend the ranchers. She is just backing exactly up what you said. Again, we invite the park services on at any time, and we invite the cattle ranchers on at any time on Jane UnChained. We'd love to speak to them.
Yeah, let me say something about Kathleen's comment. They defend the ranchers as though that's part of their job description. They spend more time on rancher affairs, it seems, than they do actually trying to restore areas of the seashore. And I actually had a very long call with a member of the seashore staff. I guess I can't say the name on your show.
Please don't.
But every time I confronted this person with facts, the conversation would go to, well, you got to consider the history of these people and how much that land means to them. And
no,
that's embarrassing. You have the right to get emotionally involved and sympathize with people if you want to, but we're supposed to be dealing with facts. We're supposed to be dealing with science here, not making excuses for people who sold their land, by the way, and benefited greatly from doing so, and who are not going to be in a hardship when they leave there. They have land elsewhere where they have multiple operations running. The reason.
So this is not breaking. This would not, these people are, it's a big conglomeration. This is just part of what they own.
Correct.
At the park.
Correct.
Belongs to the people.
Correct.
And at this point, they choose not to, and the land is up for sale, not to relinquish it.
Well, you know what? The reason that they're still there, from financially speaking, is because they're getting these lease backs at an incredibly low rate, and we are helping subsidize that. We're paying for it. We help pay. We the taxpayers pay for upkeep going on out there. We ultimately have to pay for road repairs that go on out there. Well, what's destroying the roads out there are these massive semi trucks and tractors and things that are conducting commercial business on public land.
Yeah, and we want to remind everyone that this comment is a good comment. I'm glad they said this. Such an important documentary to enlighten the public. Please go watch the video. Please go watch the film. It's an amazing film. Thank you, Skylar, for making it. Go to theshameofpointraised.org. It's going to tell you the whole story. It names names because Skylar's not afraid to name names. We got to keep this tiger down a little bit. But no, seriously, we love what you're doing, and we're so grateful for your work. And I do want to have you on and talk more broadly about all the other conservation work you're doing. But right now, we want to focus in on this situation here and see what we can do. By public outcry, perhaps it just hasn't been strong enough yet. If people agree, perhaps they should speak louder. Is there any way we could put up some links here for people to take some do some actionable items? We want them to watch the film. Is there anything else we can ask them to do to address this?
I have it.
The video, have watch parties, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have watch parties. If you go to shameofpointraise.org, the film is only a small part of that website. I've made a great effort over the years to try and tackle some of the propaganda that people run into when they start researching this for themselves. And there are some links for how to take action. And I'll update those with some new stuff.
Can you give us an example of one? Not to put you on the spot. Can you give us an example of one way they can take action?
One way, there's a petition to sign right now to make sure that Biden's choice for Secretary of the Interior actually happens, because Republicans are trying to block that because, hey, Republicans apparently seem to be all about destroying the planet.
Yeah, well, we like to just kind of not get into that kind of, but the thing is, people can go to Shame of Point Reyes. There's a petition to sign there. Is there a way to, can you find it right away when you come to the page?
No, I'll make it.
If you give me some links right after the show, folks, I'll put them up on this broadcast. So when you share it out with others, it'll be there for the others.
They can write to the Park Service has a new superintendent, and the public should write to him, because he seems to have been handpicked for the purpose of continuing the destruction of the seashore and promoting the farms. He came from a park that was promoting farming and actively killing native species. Not just talking about doing it, but they had already started pursuing that. And so this is the guy who has just been brought into Point Reyes. And I would have to speculate that there's an agenda there to continue to pursue doing what was already planned to be doing, which was to increase the power of the ranchers while getting rid of native wildlife. You can make your voices known to him, and that you don't support that. The more people who make their voices known, the more it hurts the stance that is used by some of the politicians that this is what the majority of people want. And it's absolutely not true, but it is something that gets said over and over again because it makes those politicians sound like they're the good guys. They're like, hey, we're doing what the public wants. It's absolutely not true. It is doing only what one special interest group and industry wants, at the expense of literally everyone else.
And we've seen this over and over in different areas of animal welfare and so forth. Different horse racing, we find,
it's not just some coincidence that vegetation that provides habitat for animals is missing from ranchland. No, it was removed by and for that industry. And that reduction, unfortunately, is ongoing. Fire control and vegetation management is a topic increasingly on everyone's minds, so I've got to touch on this really quick. A promotional spin on behalf of the ranchers is that they are actually fighting back invasive brush, and in so doing are keeping the seashore recreationally accessible. There I am, struggling through the invasive brush, which, by the way, is actually native brush. Gee, can't wait to get back to that ranch land for my beautiful hike in nature. And no animal agriculture propaganda would be complete without the argument that we need grazing cattle to reduce the threat of fire. Keep that in mind as you learn about the plants in Point Reyes. Unfortunately, when you look out over the coyote brush, and I'm just going to stop the video right there for a minute because you can see that not everything is green. You have some perennial plants that change color a little bit, some are even a little bit red. The reason I'm showing you this is everything you see, well, almost everything, like 99% of what you see that is not green or looks like it's potential fire fuel is not native. It's introduced, it's annual, and can be traced back to animal agriculture.
So there we've got it over and over again. I think it's pretty clear what's going on there. It seems pretty clear. Is there anything else you want to add about that?
Well,
And not to mention the fire hazard. Why don't we talk about that for a moment?
well, this is something that is sweeping the nation. It seems like that we have to have livestock grazing on vegetation. They're calling it vegetation management in order to save us from fires. And I don't think most people are aware of California's history, that all of that fire fuel on the hills is here because of animal agriculture. You know, by the mid 1800s, almost all of the native vegetation had been converted to the plants that were brought over from Europe. And the first thing that happened was the cattle came through and destroyed everything, and then the invasive plants took seed. We waste all this time, you know, blaming leaves and things like that. But the reality is that we are responsible largely for the fire fuel that is here. And for the Park Service to condone the planting and reseeding every year of non-native annual plants, which if it's an annual plant, it turns into fire fuel every single year. And because they're non-native and invasive of nature, they spread out into areas that aren't ranch land and start to compete with the native vegetation. Your natural inhibitors to fire are your perennial plants that, like the video said earlier, evolved in California in a drought climate and are better suited to resist that versus these plants that are introduced and grown every year and ready to burst into flame every year.
That is so incredible. That I had no idea that is probably the major cause of why California is that yellow. Everything's yellow most of the year because of all that's been brought in. I had no idea that happened. I just thought it got, and I'm sure most people, you know, who are not studied in this, think it's just because it's dry here and that's the vegetation and it dries up and that's what it looks like. But that's not really what it's supposed to look like at all.
No, I mean, maybe to an extent. I'm not claiming that no plants turn brown or change color.
Right.
Not like this.
It would look like the Tule Elk side.
Yeah.
It would look like the National Reserve side, which
like
does not the same.
Like I said, I've gone from studying sharks to studying plant ecology, and I now feel confident in telling you that if I went on a drive down the highway in California with any one of your viewers and we said, stop the car, and we got out and walked into the hill, you would not find any native plants except for the trees that are still standing. I mean, it's crazy how thorough the conversion has been. And you're right. I, like most people, did not know that part of California history. It seems like a pretty basic part of California history, but I guess we're just not that good at knowing our own history.
Well, I'm from the East Coast, so I'll use that. No.
You have a better excuse.
I have a teeny excuse. Well, believe it or not, we've only got a few minutes left. We have about 15 minutes left, and I want to open it up to whatever
good.
You'd like to talk about. So with our little rule that we know.
Wow. Do you have any more comments? Those are always fun too.
Yeah, I'm not getting any more comments right now for some reason. Other than that, you know, the documentary is amazing and everyone should watch it. People trying to reach out. But I just wonder, are there any other groups? I know there are people you've been working with and other people such as Jack from the Tree Project, I believe is the name of the org. Is that right? The Tree Project?
Yeah.
Yeah. And others are working. Is there any sort of organized group that people interested could contact to help grow and support this cause and this movement to end this?
We all talk to each other and try to work together. You know, there's a lot of different people doing different things. You know, you've got lawyers, you got filmmakers, you got activists. Restore Point Reyes is a good one. Tule Elk is an important one.
So these are different organizations. I know Tule Elk, about them.org. And then the one is what Restore Point Reyes, is that what's the whole?
And Restore Our Seashore, both of those.
Restore Point Reyes. Okay, I will look those up and add them in the comments so that if people want to share this out, it'll be right there and they can put it on their page too. If they share this video on their page, it'd be awesome. Please, folks, do that. And we'll be sharing it out as well. I'll be sharing this out on Instagram, etc. So what's next, Skylar? What's your next plan of action, either on this or in general? Tell us what you're up to next.
Well, I'd like to finish that shark film that I stopped, but instead I'm still doing Point Reyes, and the original film that people can go and watch right now is going to be replaced with a new one, because I've just learned so much more over the time. You know, what I learned back in 2018 I thought was bad enough, and unfortunately I've got a mountain more of controversial material to include. It really is a shameful history.
Yeah, we've gotten a couple more comments here. Zeph ears to National Park. Yes. Well, if you feel that way, let's get that word out. Share out this video. Contact your local politicians. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And then we have Kathleen asking, have you contacted environmental groups at high schools? Have you thought about that? Is that a venue possibly to raise awareness?
Sure. I mean, I'm willing to. I guess we would speak virtually these days.
We do some Zoom meetings with kids. Kids are great ambassadors, and it's their future that, you know, of course, I mean, ours too, but more so theirs in question.
And it's tricky, you know. Agriculture is one of those things that people get pretty uncomfortable when you criticize it. So you can't just waltz into any school, and especially in an ag town, and just start dropping truth bombs on people that aren't ready to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some complicated stuff there.
I think, you know, for me, I was teaching a college adjunct professor, and a student brought to me awareness about corporations and animal agriculture and cows with large, you know, like we saw the cow in the video with the huge oversized udders, and that's what woke me up. And I started to do my study, and then I started teaching courses around that. So by maybe contacting the instructors, high school, college level, that are interested and responding to this, that are concerned, and that'd probably be most of them, that's maybe a way to get into the schools, putting it into the curriculum so they learn about it. I think once people see the information, as you say, and it's right there in black and white, I think it's pretty startling. So
I think one of your commenters said, you know, this is all because of our insistence on eating something we shouldn't be eating in the first place. And, you know, the Shame of Point Reyes isn't a vegan film. It's not. It just has vegan messages, because when you go vegan, there are all of these positive benefits that come with it. You know, our treatment of those animals only exists because we're trying to make a profit from those animals. These animals live in slavery, and they're hooked up to machines, and they have their babies stolen from them, and they get fed food that has to be imported in, and then they poop out incredible amounts of poop and then pollute the environment, all because of, like that person said, a product that we don't need to be eating in the first place. So we stop being cruel to these animals, and suddenly the environment benefits from it too. You know, it's a win-win, but we just insist on, you know, I won't go down this path. I'm working on a whole nother project, but it's like, it's really fascinating to examine the human mind and some of the reasons that we don't want to give up eating other animals. It's almost like,
why do you think that is? If you've been doing, I know you've been doing a lot of research. What would you know?
It's almost like humans have it's almost like we have an insecurity complex. Like the only way that we can continue to feel like we're at the top is if we are oppressing others. And, you know, we have to be the top of the food chain. And the reality is we're not even in the food chain. You know, we don't participate in the food chain. We just extract from the food chain. And no one's ever willing to die or get killed by an animal and return to the earth and recycle the soil. No, we don't participate in that. So it's silly for us to say that we're part of the food chain. You know, sharks kill 5 people a year globally, and they're supposed to be this incredibly scary creature. But we think that they're the devil because 5 of us die.
I heard they spit humans out when most of the time. They don't really, they don't even like the way we taste. Is that true? Surfer told me that once. I was shocked. I'm like, really?
We bleed to death because we're so fragile compared to what they would normally prey upon. But that's true. We don't get consumed.
So they're not even interested. We're just where we shouldn't be, probably.
Mistakes happen. You know, it's pretty crazy to set an animal on standard that it can't ever mess up ever. You know, it's crazy. I mean, who knows why a shark bites someone? There's so many films on TV that show, every show on a Shark Week is anatomy of a shark bite, or why do sharks attack? And they should be asking, why don't sharks do it more often? Because that's what's really interesting.
Yeah. We've got another comment here. Humans not want to adapt, stubborn, self-centered, marketing millions of agriculture industry is there to brainwash. Yes, we've seen a lot of ads, Collins. Why is it that every moment on TV, every time you turn on the TV, there's a commercial about cheese, meat, dairy? Because nobody really wants it. They got to push it on us.
Well, there
are people that eat it, but what I'm saying is they sure are pushing it. They're not selling as much as they'd like.
It's so true, because I don't really watch TV anymore. It's when you have all this streaming stuff. But if a sport event is on, and I go back to watching regular broadcast
or news, and
the commercial comes on, it's like, oh my God, this is all meat. It's like it's meat or milk, or alcohol or insurance.
And insurance, get you, or pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Pharmaceuticals, meat, insurance.
Insurance for the health problems that you're going to have from eating the products that are being advertised in the same broadcast.
And there's also a shame. Do you notice? I notice a lot of the people I know don't eat meat, meaning my family, or do eat meat. Sorry. And I notice there's they almost are ashamed of me. Like they don't want to, they say, oh, she's vegan. Like she's weird. Believe it or not, you still get that reaction.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, it's crazy. And when you look at the facts of these people, you're like you're saying, it is the advertising, it is the marketing. And that's why no matter what, as much as we repeat the message, I'll be here repeating messages until things change, because I know I worked in advertising, and that's how to get people to hear you, by repeating, and so, and wonderful people like you doing these films, and I can't wait to see your next project. And this is pretty exciting. And I hope that this situation, we can do something to help change this, all of us. So please keep us posted, and stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Skylar, for being on today. Everyone, thanks for watching. I'll be back next week with another story for you about animal welfare and conservation. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.